Welcome to Module 5, Solution Architect Series, Explore Microsoft Copilot Studio. This module is part of the Solution Architect Design Microsoft Power Platform Solutions Learning Path. Let's get started. Solution Architect Series, Explore Microsoft Copilot Studio. Introduction. Currently, people everywhere use multiple communication channels such as email, web chat, telephone, and platforms such as Slack, Microsoft Teams, and Facebook. Organizations need to be accessible to their customers over these multiple channels. Moreover, they need to respond consistently in the same manner, regardless of which channel that a customer decided to use. Users and customers have become increasingly demanding, requiring constant daily responses that are tailored to their behaviors and characteristics, and answers to more complex requests. AI-powered agents use conversational AI, known as chatbots, to respond to human questions and requests in an intelligent way. Organizations use chatbots to provide the first line of response to customers, handling common inquiries across multiple channels. Chatbots instigate a conversational dialogue with the human, whether it's over the web or another channel such as SMS text service. Issues around building chatbots. The following statistics depict the complex challenges that organizations are currently experiencing when dealing with both employees and customers. 66% of customers opt for using self-service first before contacting an agent. The reason is because contacting an agent can be time-consuming, and the customer waits in a queue when all they want is an immediate answer. 90% of customers expect consistency across channels. Whether they're on the phone, website, or retail store, customers want the same treatment from all channels. 59% of channels are managed in silos. Call centers have different incentives than retail stores. The website is managed separately, and so on. Chatbots can help address these challenges, but chatbots can be difficult to create and expensive to maintain. Traditionally, creating a chatbot requires skill and effort. You need developers to code the chatbot, subject matter experts or SMEs to define the conversational flow, AI specialists to handle the language processing, and the chatbot needs to connect your operating systems to achieve relevant data. Traditionally, creating a chatbot requires skill and effort. You need developers to code the chatbot, subject matter experts or SMEs to define the conversational flow, AI specialists to handle the language processing, and the chatbot needs to connect to your operating systems to access relevant data. Microsoft Copilot Studio Copilots. Microsoft Copilot Studio is designed to create copilots whether the user is external, your customers, or internal, your employees. SMEs can build conversational flows by using a graphical interface with no code in a browser. Developers and administrators can assist SMEs in building conversational flows and integrating copilots with line-of-business applications by using Microsoft Power Automate Cloud Flows. Microsoft Copilot Studio includes AI language processing to create natural, conversational AI. Microsoft Copilot Studio makes it possible for anyone to build a copilot, which greatly reduces the time and cost that is involved in deploying a copilot. Use cases for Copilot. You can add conversational AI into an application to increase the user experience. Common users for external copilots include answer questions or inquiries, process return and exchange requests, resolve a complaint or problem, make a purchase, check inventory, make a recommendation or track shipping, introduce a product and use as a help desk, make a reservation or reserve a ticket to an event, manage email subscription preferences, pay a bill or process a claim, find a qualified person, for example, professional services, provide triage for healthcare and crisis communication, request customer feedback, and create quizzes, surveys, and competitions. A popular use for copilots is in customer support scenarios. For example, a copilot can assist you with troubleshooting, warranty, and repairs. Most people's experience with copilots is in customer support scenarios. However, more powerful use cases exist for using copilots inside of an organization. HR support, employee onboarding, employee ideas, change management, IT support, sales support, case management, issue management, inspections, internal process information. Reasons to consider building an internal Copilot include consistent internal communication, convenience, speed and accessibility, all-day, everyday availability, its ability to act on behalf of the user for routine tasks, its ability to replace intranet or internal email for frequently accessed information, solution architect's role in determining the need for copilots. Solution architects should consider using copilots as part of the solution as follows: replacing web forms, including lead generation forms and inquiry forms, helping customers navigate and finding a person or information instead of using website search, redirecting inquiries to the right person in the organization, such as customer service agents or professional services staff. Copilots aren't only for websites. Microsoft Copilot Studio can also be deployed to the following entities: Facebook, Slack, Twilio, email, mobile apps. If the solution architect decides to use copilots, they'll need to ensure that the project team follows the principles and best practices for building copilots as discussed in the remainder of this module. Responsible AI. Microsoft has defined 6 principles for the responsible use of AI. Because copilots are AI-based services, solution architects need to keep these in mind when designing copilots. The transparency principle is one that particularly applies to copilots. The transparency principle is concerned with ensuring that the human understands that they're interacting with a copilot. When a copilot conversation is started, the copilot should clearly state that it's a copilot. The copilot should state its purpose and limitations, such as listing the scope of what the bot can answer or do. A copilot should enable the user to escalate or transfer to a human. Copilots work well when they're limited solely to their purpose and don't try to be too generic. Next unit, chatbot building options. Chatbot building options. Microsoft provides many options for building chatbots. Azure Bot Framework, Azure Bot Framework Composer, Microsoft Copilot Studio. Azure Bot Framework. Microsoft Azure Bot Service is part of the Azure Bot Framework, a series of SDKs and tools that allow developers to create and deploy custom bots and virtual assistants by using code. Azure Bot Service is a managed service for developing bots. A bot communicates by receiving messages and sending responses by using Web Apps feature of Microsoft Azure App Service to handle communications. Bots are similar to web applications. They take requests and return responses. A bot can perform operations like other applications, such as accessing databases, calling APIs to other services, reading files, and performing calculations. The process of receiving a message and sending a response back to the user is known as a turn. Consider how conversations between humans work, where each person speaks one at a time, that is, in turn. Bots operate the same way, responding to user input in turn. A developer can connect an Azure Bot Service bot with the language understanding LUIS service within Azure Cognitive Services to add language understanding to a bot to allow for a conversational experience. A developer can also enable their bot to use a knowledge base that was created in a Q&A maker. An advantage of Azure Bot Service is that after developers have built the bot can be deployed to one or more channels, such as Facebook or Slack, without having to change the bot's code. Azure Bot Service manages the communication between these channels and your bots, and it adapts the messages that your bot generates to the format of the channel that it's connected to. Bots that are created with Azure Bot Framework can be integrated with Microsoft Copilot Studio bots. Bot Service templates. Bot Service includes templates to help developers get started with building bots. If you create a bot in the Azure portal, you can select the Echo Bot template that will only return user input, or you can select the Core Bot template that includes LUIS. Bot Framework Composer. Bot Framework Composer is a tool to build bots that uses a visual user interface to create the conversational flow and generate responses. Bot Framework Composer is a recent addition to Azure Bot Services and is subject to ongoing development to add further features. Bot Framework Composer includes a visual editing canvas for conversation flows, tools to create and manage Lewis and Q&A components, powerful language generation and template system, a ready-to-use bot runtime executable program. Bot Framework Composer can be used to build bots without the need to write code, and it supports both Lewis and Q&A Maker. Similarities exist between Microsoft Copilot Studio and Bot Framework. Both provide a no-code authoring canvas for users to build bots. However, key differences are present in the functionality and look of both technologies. For instance, topics in Microsoft Copilot Studio are similar to dialogues in Bot Framework Composer. Bot Framework Composer is an open source and multi-platform service with support for Microsoft Windows, Linux and Mac OS. For more information, see Bot Composer on GitHub. Bot makers can use Bot Framework Composer to create custom content and add it to Microsoft Copilot Studio. Q&A Maker. Q&A Maker is a service that creates a searchable knowledge base from existing documents and websites. This knowledge base contains built-in natural language processing. The Q&A Maker knowledge base can then be used in bots and other applications to respond to FAQ-type questions. Q&A Maker doesn't provide a bot, but you can generate an Azure Bot Service bot from your Q&A Maker knowledge base in a few minutes without having to write code. A knowledge base consists of questions and answer pairs. You can create the questions and answers in many different ways. Extraction from existing documents, extraction from web pages, manual input. Q&A Maker knowledge bases can be integrated with Microsoft Copilot Studio bots with Power Automate. Microsoft Copilot Studio. Microsoft Copilot Studio copilots are powered by AI, which allows users to focus on more complex and higher value work while the copilots handle simple, repetitive interactions. With Microsoft Copilot Studio, you can create copilots, chatbots, by using a straightforward no-code graphical interface from within a web browser. Microsoft Copilot Studio copilots interact with customer and employees, answer questions and provide information. You can deploy Microsoft Copilot Studio chatbots to multiple channels, including your own website, Facebook, and Microsoft Teams. You can create Microsoft Copilot Studio chatbots within the need for data scientists. You can create Microsoft Copilot Studio chatbots without the need for data scientists or developers. Microsoft Copilot Studio is built on top of Azure Bot Framework and uses the capabilities of the Bot Framework in a no-code environment. Microsoft Copilot Studio can meet many simple internal and external requirements for chatbots and is designed to be built with or by subject matter experts, SMEs. Microsoft Copilot Studio requires a tenant license and a user license for anyone who will be building copilots. Solution architects need to determine which bot technology or combination of technologies to use in the solution. This decision will depend on the available skills, if existing bots have already been deployed, and the complexity of the required bots. Next unit, chatbot concepts. Chatbot concepts. When creating copilots, you need to consider some important concepts before building your copilot. Language understanding. When humans interact with a computer application by using text or speech, they shouldn't be expected to use the application's internal instructions. A computer application must be able to handle language that is provided in a natural way and react accordingly to the meaning that the human has expressed. Natural language processing, an AI capability, provides a connection between human and computer language, and it allows humans and computer applications to work together in a natural way. Microsoft Copilot Studio hosts multiple AI models and AI capabilities, the core of which is a transformer-based natural language processing model. Microsoft Copilot Studio uses natural language processing of the Language Understanding Lewis service, which is part of Azure Cognitive Services. Microsoft Copilot Studio employs a language understanding model that uses an example-based approach that is powered by a deep neural model. This type of large-scale model only needs to be trained once, with large amounts of data. Afterwards, it can be used for specific tasks that use fewer examples and no training. Specifically, for Microsoft Copilot Studio, the use of this model allows for an intuitive way for Copilot makers to confidently work on their Copilot content without having to involve AI experts. Topics. Microsoft Copilot Studio works by identifying the subject that the user is asking about and then having a conversation about that subject. Topics are the main subjects of the conversation. A Microsoft Copilot Studio Copilot can have up to 1,000 topics. Each topic is a separate conversation path. It's the combination of topics in a Copilot that provides a natural conversation flow. You can create topics for the tasks or requests that you need your Copilot to respond to. Topics define the purpose of your Copilot and are the first step in creating your Copilot. A topic has two parts: trigger phrases, the keywords, phrases, or utterances that the user will enter. Conversation nodes determine how your Copilot should respond. Each topic has its own conversation flow with the Copilot. When a Copilot identifies a trigger for a topic, the conversation for that Copilot is initiated. The use of natural language processing model means that in Microsoft Copilot Studio, when you craft trigger phrases for a topic, you only need to provide a few examples, usually in the range of 5 to 10 phrases for a single topic. Shorter trigger phrases are better, and you should aim for 2 to 10 words. Additionally, you need to make sure that the trigger phrases are semantically different. Changing a single verb or noun could be enough to expand a topic's coverage. Adding elements like new articles, changing or adding the or a or an, changing capitalization, adding contractions, you are or don't, or adding plurals won't improve the trigger because the contractions are already considered in the natural language processing model. Generate topics. Many organizations will have procedures, product information, frequently asked questions or FAQs, and other information in documents or on websites. Microsoft Copilot Studio can extract information and create topics with trigger phrases by using the Suggest Topics option. Note: if you are using Microsoft Dynamics 365 Customer Service Insights, you can select the topics from within Customer Service Insights and then add the topics and trigger phrases to your Microsoft Copilot Studio Copilot. Entities. Microsoft Copilot Studio attempts to extract information from the phrases that the user enters. This extracted information can be used to control the conversation's path. Microsoft Copilot Studio uses entities to identify information in a textual phrase, such as names, dates, and numbers. Then your Copilot can use this information to decide on the appropriate next step in the conversation. Entities are people, places, and things that a Copilot can identify from the phrases that are entered into a Copilot. Microsoft Copilot Studio includes a set of pre-built entities for the most commonly used objects, and you can create custom entities for the domain of the business solution that you're building. Channels. Azure Bot Framework separates the logic of the Copilot from the communication with different services. When you create a Copilot, you can only use the Copilot when it's embedded on websites with the web chat channel. You can add channels to your Copilot to make it available on other platforms and services known as channels. One major benefit of Azure Bot Service is that you can develop your Copilot once and then connect to multiple channels without needing to change the code for each channel to handle specific requirements and formats of that channel. Azure Bot Service handles those requirements and converts the formats. The following channels are available for connection to Copilots: Alexa, Direct Line Speech, Email, Facebook, GroupMe, Kik, Line, Microsoft Teams, Skype, Slack, Telegram, Telephone, Twilio SMS, Web Chat. Microsoft Copilot Studio can be deployed to the same channels. Next unit, best practices. Best practices. Copilots, if used, are a powerful tool for increasing customer interaction with your solution. A solution architect must ensure that the copilots are correctly built and meet the requirements. This section contains recommendations around designing and deploying copilots. Plan a copilot. When planning a Copilot, the solution architect should define the scope of the Copilot, define the purpose of the Copilot, define which channels that the Copilot will be deployed to, define the key metrics and success criteria, verify the topics, entities, and conversational flows. A Copilot supports 3 different types of topic: informational, tasks, troubleshooting. A good Microsoft Copilot Studio Copilot will have a high business impact. That is, a high level of traffic, a low level of integration complexity, and a high level of conversation completion that is achieved without the need for escalation to a human agent. A well-designed Copilot will have a clearly defined set of goals, where each topic is linked to a business process, and have trigger events, a clear set of rules, a set of documents, and a series of tasks that will be performed. The solution architect might need to provide guidelines for creating topics and trigger phrases for Copilot authors to follow. Escalations. With Microsoft Copilot Studio, you can hand off conversations to live agents seamlessly and contextually. When handing off a conversation, you're sharing the full history of the conversation, the context, and all user-defined variables. Having access to this context means that live agents who are using a connected engagement hub can receive notification that a conversation requires a live agent, see the context of the prior conversation, and resume that conversation. Important. You need to have an engagement hub that is being used by live agents, such as Omnichannel for customer service, and you need to configure the connection. The solution architect should determine when escalation should occur and how escalation will be handled. Microsoft Copilot Studio Copilots come with telemetry already built in so that you can monitor how your Copilots are being used. Key KPIs are the rates of abandonment and escalation to a human agent. You should monitor your Copilots and then change them to increase effectiveness. Variables. Variables let you save responses from your users in a conversation so that you can reuse them later in other conversations. The response for each question that is asked in a conversation is stored as a variable. You can then pass the variable to a Power Automate flow or use the variable later in the topic, or even in other topics to control the questions that are being asked. For example, you can use a variable to decide to skip a question if you have the information that you need at that point. Variables can be defined as topic. The variable can only be used within its topic. Copilot. The variables can be used by any topic. Solution architects should encourage Copilot authors to use variables to help improve conversational flow. Authentication. You can enable user authentication directly within Authentication. You can enable user authentication directly within Microsoft Copilot Studio Copilot Conversation. User authentication means that you can get a user's basic properties, such as their name and ID, in Copilot variables. However, you can also prompt a user to sign in by using an authentication node. Retrieve a user token for that user, and then use that token to retrieve the user's information from an operating system. Microsoft Copilot Studio supports the following authentication providers: Microsoft Entra ID, any identity provider that is compliant with the OAuth 2 standard, Microsoft account, or Facebook. Microsoft Copilot Studio supports a single sign-on, SSO. Microsoft Copilot Studio supports single sign-on, SSO, which means that Copilots can sign in even if the user on their page where the Copilot is deployed. You'll need to register the web app in Microsoft Entra ID to enable SSO. Note: SSO is only supported on the live website publication channel and the Teams channel. Solution architects should determine if authentication is required for Copilots and the identity provider that is used. In many situations, the organization might already have identity providers configured in Microsoft Entra ID. If you're creating Copilots for Microsoft Teams, then it's simple to configure with the Only for Teams option. However, if you're creating Copilots for customers, you might need to consider the Azure B2B and the Azure B2B. If you're creating Copilots from Microsoft Teams, then it's simple to configure with the Only for Teams option. However, if you're creating Copilots for customers, you might need to consider the Azure B2B and Azure B2C for authentication. Capacity. When you purchase a Microsoft Copilot Studio license, you'll gain capacity for the specified number of build sessions. Microsoft Copilot Studio will pool this capacity across the entire tenant. You can monitor how many build sessions have been used from the Analytics tab in the Microsoft Copilot Studio portal. The solution architect will need to estimate the number of sessions that are required and then ensure that monitoring is implemented to track Copilot usage and costs. Rate limits. Quotas are applied to Copilots to limit how often messages can be sent to the Copilot. The purpose of quotas is to throttle the service load and protect the service from being overloaded. Quotas for Microsoft Copilot Studio Copilots are defined as requests per minute, RPM. A request is a message from the user to the Copilot or a message from the Azure Copilot Framework skill in a single chat session. The quota is 600 RPM in North America region and 800 RPM for the rest of the world. Solutions. Microsoft Copilot Studio is solution aware and can be included in Solutions and Application Lifecycle Management (ALM) processes. Important. Copilots contain many subcomponents, such as topics that must be exported and imported together. You should consider segmenting your solution and having Copilots and their subcomponents in a separate solution from other components. Note: you can only import and export Copilots with the Microsoft Copilot Studio web app. The feature is not available in the Microsoft Copilot Studio app in Microsoft Teams. Deployment. Microsoft Copilot Studio is created in a selected environment. You should ensure that you're using the correct environment for development, test, and production purposes when creating Copilots. If you're using skills, then you need to define environment variables for each skill. After deployment of your Copilot through a solution, you might need to perform certain manual tasks. Power Automate Cloud Flows. Configure connections for the first time, and then go to the Microsoft Copilot Studio portal and select the Copilot. Skills. Add the values for the skills environment variables. User authentication. Configure user authentication in the Copilot so that it can take actions on the user's behalf. Escalations. Configure external services that hand off Copilot escalations to a human agent. Multi-channel. Configure external channels such as Facebook and internal non-Microsoft Copilot Studio services such as Microsoft Teams. The solution architect should ensure that steps are included in the deployment plan for the solution. Next unit, integrate chatbots. Integrate chatbots. Microsoft Copilot Studio Copilots will often require access to other services and systems to be able to complete their goals. Microsoft Copilot Studio can also be integrated with other Microsoft AI services to create an enhanced customer experience. Power Automate. The primary integration for Microsoft Copilot Studio Copilots is through Power Automate Cloud Flows. Microsoft Copilot Studio can pass parameters to a Power Automate Cloud Flow and receive data back from the flow and use that data in the Copilot's conversation flow. For instance, a Copilot might handle customer order updates and will use a Power Automate Cloud Flow to fetch the order status from the relevant system. Power Automate Cloud Flows can be initiated from the Call and Action node in a topic. Skills. Microsoft Copilot Studio enables you to extend your Copilot by using Microsoft Bot Framework skills. If existing Azure Bot Framework bots are deployed, you can define those bots as a skill and then embed the skill within a Microsoft Copilot Studio Copilot. You can then use the Azure Bot Framework bot from within your Microsoft Copilot Studio Copilot. A developer can also use Microsoft Copilot Studio Copilot from an Azure Bot Framework bot. The Microsoft Copilot Studio Copilot becomes the skill, and the Microsoft Bot Framework Dispatcher tool can integrate with the Microsoft Copilot Studio Copilot. Solution architects need to oversee the design of Copilots and decide when to use existing Copilots and when to create new Copilots and with which toolset. Bot Framework Composer. Bot makers can use Bot Framework Composer to create custom content and add it to Microsoft Copilot Studio. For instance, by using Bot Framework Composer with your Microsoft Copilot Studio Copilot, you can show an adaptive card, use Microsoft Bing search as a backup. For more information, see Microsoft Copilot Studio Composer and Advanced Framework Composer. Cognitive Services. Azure Cognitive Services can be used by Copilot for many purposes such as sentiment analysis, image classification, form recognition. You can use Azure Cognitive Services with Microsoft Copilot Studio by using Power Automate Cloud Flows and the associated Cognitive Services connector. Next unit, Microsoft Copilot Studio in Teams. Microsoft Copilot Studio in Teams. Microsoft Copilot Studio is available as a standalone web app and as a discrete app within Microsoft Teams. Most functionality between the two apps is the same. However, you might have different reasons for choosing one version or the other based on your requirements. Microsoft Copilot Studio Web App. You will use the standalone Microsoft Studio Web App if you are an IT administrator or consultant and want to create bots for your customers to engage with, want to create bots for external customers, have used chatbot services in the past and want to trial or test Microsoft Copilot Studio, are familiar with advanced chatbot concepts such as entities and variables and want to create complex chatbots. Access the standalone web app here. Microsoft Copilot Studio app in Microsoft Teams. You will use the Microsoft Copilot Studio discrete app in Microsoft Teams if you are an employee or a member of an organization or team and want to create chatbots to answer common questions that are posed by other employees or teammates. Want to use advanced concepts such as entities and variables, but have the chatbot available only internally. Want to create and distribute a chatbot in the shortest time possible. Microsoft Copilot Studio app in Microsoft Teams supports single sign-on, SSO, which means that chatbots can sign in the user silently without having the user to enter their credentials. Microsoft Copilot Studio in Microsoft Teams does not require more licensing because the license is included with Microsoft 365 subscriptions. Important: access is limited to membership of the Microsoft team that the chatbot is deployed to. The chatbot can't be deployed to other channels. Limitations. Limitations of Microsoft Copilot Studio in Microsoft Teams are that it is limited to the standard Power Automate connectors that are available for flows that are triggered from Microsoft Copilot Studio. It can be integrated with Azure Bot Framework skills, but it requires a Microsoft Copilot Studio standalone license. It can't integrate Microsoft Bot Framework dialogues, and it can't be used with Azure Bot Framework Composer, and it can't be included in solutions. Service limits. Microsoft Copilot Studio in Microsoft Teams is limited to 10 sessions for each user every 24 hours. Let's check our knowledge. Answer the following questions to see what you've learned. You're building a Microsoft Copilot Studio chatbot. You need to add an existing bot that was developed in Node.js with the Azure Bot Framework to your chatbot. What should you do? Use Azure Bot Composer, use the Dispatcher tool, add a skill, use Power Automate. I'm going to say use Azure Bot Composer, but it might well be the Dispatcher tool. Let's see. You need to answer questions in a Microsoft Copilot Studio chatbot from a Q&A Maker knowledge base. What should you use? Azure Bot Composer, Power Automate, Custom Entities, Channels. I'm going to say Azure Bot Composer for this one. You need to create a chatbot that supports Lewis and Q&A Maker. What should you use? Microsoft Copilot Studio Web App, Microsoft Copilot Studio Microsoft Teams, Adaptive Cards, Azure Bot Composer. I'm going to say Azure Bot Composer. Let's review the answers. So for the first one, it should have been add a skill. For the second one, should have been Power Automate. And the third one, Azure Bot Composer, was right. Let's go to the summary. Microsoft Copilot Studio is a powerful tool for creating great customer experiences. Solution architects should consider using Copilots as part of the solution too. Replace web forms, help customers find information instead of using a website search, provide employee assistance and information retrieval. If the solution architect does decide to use Copilots, they'll need to ensure that the project team follows the principles and best practices that are outlined in this module. Next steps. For more information, see the following links: Building Copilots, Planning Copilots, Microsoft's Copilot Studio Learning Path. I'll put a link to these in the description below. Hope you found this useful. Give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for listening.